My friend, have you wondered what your heart rate variability can tell you about your body? Like if you're super stressed, or if you're pretty relaxed, or if you trained too hard the day before and you need to take it easy today. There are a few tools that help you measure HRV. One of them is a ring, then there's a watch, but there's also a chest strap, and there's different degrees of accuracy for all these tools. If you watch this episode that's coming up, you're going to learn the best way, first of all, to measure your HRV, but also what it really means for you and what it can tell you about your body and your nervous system, which is really cool stuff. So check out the episode, and I hope you learn as much as I did. If you're enjoying the show, please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our whole goal with this show is to help you, or to share tips with you that will help you look and feel younger, even as you age. This is the Anti-Aging Hacks Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Ronda Collier. Ronda, I want to welcome you to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, I want to introduce you real quick to the listeners. You are a BSEE MA psychology. You're an advisor and co-founder to Sweetwater Health, and we'll talk about what that company is. You've got more than 25 years of experience in high technology product development with a proven track record of delivering leading edge consumer electronic products with both privately held startups and Fortune 500 corporations. So Ronda spent the last 3 years as an independent, or many years as an independent scholar, researching non-invasive health monitoring techniques to improve personal well-being. This research has led to the founding of Sweetwater LLC in 2010. And Ronda speaks about this all the time, and she's a nerd at heart as far as HRV is concerned. So we're going to dig right in, and we're going to go deep into this topic. I have a ton of questions for you, Ronda. So again, welcome to the podcast. And in terms of getting started with HRV, I know that this is a newish concept for a lot of people. So if you wouldn't mind just setting the background of what HRV, or heart rate variability, is and why is it important for us?
Okay, great. So when people think of their heart beating, and the best thing for people to do is visualize an EKG where you get the spikes, and those are what we'll call the beat time. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but if your heart beats at 60 beats per minute, it doesn't beat at 1 second intervals like a metronome. So that's the time between those heartbeats. It's not just 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. It's like 0.92 seconds, then 0.98 seconds, 1.02, 1.08, and so on. That averages out to 1 second intervals, or 60 beats per minute. So this natural variation in the time between heartbeats is fundamentally heart rate variability. And it's caused by the two branches of your nervous system. So we have our autonomic nervous system, which has the sympathetic, which is commonly known as the fight or flight branch. And then we have the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, rest and repair branch. And so the sympathetic nervous system speeds the heart up, and the parasympathetic slows it down. And so you have this sort of tug of war, if you will, between the two branches of the nervous system that causes the variability in the beat timing.
I see. It's very interesting. So how does the nervous system actually communicate with the heart, Ronda?
So the heart has this, it's pretty complicated, actually. It's got a few things going on with it. It's got what's called the SA node, which is the sinoatrial node. And that beats naturally at like 120 beats per second, but that's that tissue that's always firing off. And then we have mostly the vagus nerve. We have a little bit of the sympathetic, but the vagal nerve is a major mediator of the heartbeat. And it's really there to slow you down. And so when we talk about HRV mediation in the body, the vagus nerve is a big piece of that. So we have all the nervous system coming in. We've got the sympathetic nervous system. If you get scared or get angry, it's going to speed the heart up. Or if you exercise, it's going to speed the heart up. And then you have this vagus nerve, which is down, slowing it down because it's innervated. It's the electrical tissues of the heart are innervated through not only the SA node, but the two branches of the nervous system.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that does. So that's interesting. The vagus nerve, or it's getting actually pretty common, the vagal tone, as some people call it, what it does. It's getting in popularity, just like HRV, and it seems to be very, very important for our body because it's connected to literally every major organ, and it goes all the way up and down, right?
Exactly. It's the 10th of 12 cranial nerves, and it's connected to multiple organs, including the heart. And it really is, and that's why it's gaining popularity, is because high vagal tone allows you to be able to put the brakes on stress. Okay.
Okay, so you want to have high vagal tone, which is basically a function of the vagus nerve.
Yes.
And the vagus nerve calms you down, while other activities that you mentioned, exercising or being in constant fight or flight or stress or somebody cutting you off, will put you into a very sympathetic state, which you don't want to be in.
Exactly.
Except for very short periods if you must.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to dive into asking you some questions in the context of the app, your app that I've been using. We started talking a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago, and you pointed me to your app, and you said there's a couple apps out there, but our app it gives you nerdy data and stuff. So I immediately downloaded your app because I want to see all the data. And so let's get into it from the context of the number, then we'll come back and tie it back together, and then we'll talk about some ways to improve the vagal tone, the HRV numbers, and whatnot. So when I do open your app, Rhonda, I see a bunch of numbers. First of all, I see stress, HRV, heartbeat, but I also see things called RM, SSD. I see LF, HF, like RR. Like, could you just explain, get the nerdy stuff out of the way, and then we can move on?
Yes. Well, let's start with the easy one, stress.
Okay.
So stress there's a neural network in there that does the real heavy lifting for that calculation. And there's personalized algorithms tied into it. But for the layman, it's essentially the balance of your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. So when you're relaxed, sitting on the couch, or maybe when you first wake up in the morning, hopefully, you've got a nice balance between the two. You might even have higher parasympathetic tone. So that's what the stress metric is. It's showing you how balanced your nervous system is, like the left and right speakers on a stereo. Okay. Then we move into what are called, you could call standard metrics of heart rate variability. These are what are used in the thousands and thousands of research papers on HRV. They're all in the National Institute of Health, Science Direct. These are all peer-reviewed, 30 years of study on this. And so we have one that's called SDNN, which is really the standard deviation of the heart rhythm. So let's back up and go to the time between heartbeats. So what if anyone who knows statistics, we would take those values, 0.92, 0.98, 1.0. We make basically a time series. Then we can run a standard deviation on that. So that's what SDNN is. And it's generally run on a 24-hour period. HRV is a little complicated because there's something called long-term HRV, and then there's short-term, and there's industry standards for that. Long-term is 24 hours. Short-term is 5 minutes. You can get away with 3 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So SDNN is generally a sign of your resilience in your nervous system and is run on a 24-hour period. You'll see circadian rhythms in it and all kinds of things. So it's a good measure of your general overall systemic health.
Okay. What about RR and RMSSD?
So RMSSD is the root mean square of successive differences. Okay, there you go. It is yet another statistical analysis of those RR intervals. And that particularly is a representation of vagal tone. Okay, and this is once again through 30 years of scientific research. So we take RMSSD, which is a funny number for people who aren't kind of experts in HRV. And we basically run that through an algorithm and turn it into what we call HRV in the app. HRV in the app goes between 0 and 100, which is a range that more people can understand, where 0 is not good and 100 is great. RMSSD, you'd be like, oh, your RMSSD is 76. That's good. You know, but what about 34? Well, that's good too. But it's, you know, so there's no nice, easy, simple range. So RMSSD, root mean square of successive differences, is a vagal tone. And then we take that and run it through basically a scaling algorithm to make it more easily digestible from regular people, as a number between 0 to 100. That's basically a representation of vagal tone.
I got you. Okay. As I've been tracking my numbers over the last few days, I've been seeing my RM SSD anywhere from 42 to 112. And I honestly didn't know what it meant until right now. So that's good to see. But see
why we do it to 0 to 100?
Right.
Because those numbers aren't very intuitive. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you use the RM SSD number then, Rhonda, to translate that into an HRV number from 0 to 100, correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay. Is RMSSD the only number that goes into HRV?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. So then let's talk about HRV. So I'm seeing numbers when I wake up in the morning, anywhere from 88 to 70 something, and then during the day it can drop to like 60 or even 55 during when I'm stressed. So what does that mean as you're going about your day? So give us some color commentary on how HRV changes during the day, and what are some of the factors that are causing it to change?
Right. So we wake up in the morning, if we got a good night's sleep, restored. And that's if we got what I'll just go into call it restorative sleep, which is what it is. And so while you're sleeping, your nervous system recovers. Okay. You can think of it as you will, that you have a bucket that you wake up with, a bucket of energy, a bucket of willpower, a bucket of just what's going to get you through the day. And so if you get a good night's sleep, you wake up with a full bucket. So then you get up and you're all happy in the morning, and then you get in your car to drive to work. Not so much these days, and you hit traffic. And so that took a little bit out of your bucket. Okay. You went a little into fight or flight, even though at the same exit every day, you hit the same traffic, you get into the same response, fight or flight response. So that took a little out of your bucket. Then you go to work and you're doing your thing and you're good. And then something happens, there's a bug or whatever. And then you get stressed, takes more out of your bucket. Then you go work out and it puts a little more into your bucket. Okay. But then just running your body through the day, just regulating your blood pressure. So as I sit here, when I stand up, my bucket gets emptied a little because it has increased my heart rate to keep my blood pressure equalized so I don't pass out. Mm-hmm. And so there's all these parameters that are using up, if you will, the bucket of energy that got refilled to run your life when you did a good night's sleep. And so what you're seeing through the day is just, even if you didn't have a stressful day, you would see your HRV changing through the day. Like I mentioned, SD and N, if you're healthy, you'll have a nice circadian rhythm if you were to start tracking on a 24-hour basis. So that's normal.
Okay, let's come back to that. For the 3-minute tracking, it's easy to do in the app. You just hit a button and it starts tracking you, and it gives you a nice result that you can kind of see, and you say, okay, good. How does somebody track a 24-hour HRV number?
You would have to put on the chest strap.
Okay, for a full 24 hours?
You would, and depending on how much, now you get into the tech part, it depends how much memory you have on your phone.
Okay, because there's a stream of data going in.
Right, because we're collecting this full stream of data. And so 24 hours worth. You can certainly wear it overnight and then stop it, save it, and then run it again through the day. So there's a few ways if you really wanted to track. And then if you're that nerdy, then you're going to put it in a spreadsheet and look at it.
Yes. Okay. So if in your app, and I'm just holding up the app right now, if I was to do that, there's multiple settings. When I hit start, it says either track my training HRV, either track my, I'm going to do it right now. So monitor stress, heart rate recovery, HRV for training, or the 3-minute HRV checkup. So if I was to do a 24-hour run, I would pick the monitor stress.
Yes.
Okay. And then let it run all day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. So then what are the HF and LF numbers, Rhonda?
Okay. So this gets into electrical engineering frequencies, but I think most people understand frequencies. Red has a certain frequency, blue, all the colors. And then we get into microwave and cell frequencies. So there's all these frequencies. It turns out that there's a frequency associated with the sympathetic nervous system and a different frequency associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. And so it turns out that the sympathetic nervous system is a lower frequency. So it's 0.04 to 0.1 hertz. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is 0.1 hertz to 0.4 hertz. Okay. So what we do, so we talked about the statistic piece, which is the SDNN, standard deviation, and root mean square. We also take this time series, if you will, and we run it through what's called a fast Fourier transform. And that is very electrical engineering, but hey, what we do is we analyze the frequencies embedded secretly and stealthily in the time series. And so what comes out is we have what's called a power level. And I'll give you an example of that. If you have a 50-watt stereo receiver and you crank it up and you want to have a party, it's going to come out distorted because you just, the 50 watts just can't handle the type of volume you're trying to crank through.
Right.
Whereas if you have a 250-watt receiver, then you can crank it up and you get a nice clear signal. Well, that's similar to what we're measuring with the LF and the HF. Okay, and the VLF, that's below sympathetic, and that's controversial in what it means. But anyway, so what we're measuring is we're looking at the sympathetic nervous system, which is between 0.04 and 0.1. And what we do is we measure what's called the power spectral density, but you can think of it as the power on a stereo. Okay, so that's the number you're reading. It's how many watts. Okay, and same thing on the HF, we're looking at 0.1 to 0.4 hertz. And that's the number of watts in the parasympathetic or rest and digest response. So you want high numbers. That shows that you have the ability to not only respond to whatever life throws at you, but recover from that. Like being able to crank that stereo up and have a nice clear sound.
Do you want them as high as possible?
Yeah, I haven't seen any that are too high. The highest I saw, and I will mention, if any of your listeners have seen The Secret, Bill Harris was on The Secret, and he started Centerpoint Research, which had the HoloSync sort of biorhythms on steroids, and he was up at 10,000. Wow. But he's been doing this meditation with the HoloSync for decades. So when he really got focused, he wasn't like that when he was out talking around, but when he really got focused into his breathing, he had these huge numbers.
I got you. And I'm looking at that chart. Sorry to nerd out a little more.
That's okay.
But there's the HF and the LF, and there's the power frequency that you can track. There's up to 11,000 counts on both. So you can go up to 11,000 on both HF and LF. I'm seeing that I'm going up to 11,000 for my LF, which means I'm stressed, but not so much for HF. So does that mean when you're talking about power, does that mean when both go up or when either one goes up to that
Either
number?
one. So remember, we're looking at each frequency range and we're doing the power of that particular range.
I see.
Is what you're looking at.
Okay. But they're independent numbers. So the fact that you can go up to 11,000 on LF does not mean you'll go up to 11,000 on the HF.
You could. Sure. Why not?
Okay. But one doesn't mean the other. There's no causality.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Got it. So you want, if you are super healthy, then you should get you should have both of those up as far up as possible for you.
And I'm just I can see you're very healthy and resilient, but most people will be in the 700s, 800s power levels, even 400 during this kind of a stressful day. If you find yourself down at 100, if it's just one day, that's okay. You had a bad day and you didn't get good sleep. But if you're consistently down at these low levels of power, then that's something to maybe take to your doctor and get a checkup. Does
that mean a systemic problem like adrenal fatigue or something?
It could. Yes.
I see. Okay. Yeah. And for people that maybe in the mid-range, Rhonda, maybe not up to, the higher numbers, is there a way for them to strengthen the immune system power, the frequencies of these numbers?
Absolutely. It just goes across everything that you talk about. We've got nutrition, because remember, we're looking really at it. This is a holistic approach to health when you're starting to talk about HRV. And I do want to back up a little bit before I answer that. We consider HRV a HRV system. So it's not only your breathing, which it's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, can affect that, the deep breathing. Your environment, which includes what you put in your body in terms of food, cosmetics, all of that, water being very important. It's also the environment, whether it's people, animals, cars coming at you, or pollution in the environment. So all of this can affect you. But one of the more easy to change, it's simple, but it's not easy.
Okay.
Is our mental state on that. And so in order to start trying to improve your HRV, I would first make sure you're getting a good night's sleep. So sleep will be the first, because that is where, and if you sleep in it, you'll see, we've done studies on this, what happens. You'll see what happens to the nervous system if you're getting a good night's sleep and you wake up and it's improved. If you're a chronic insomniac or someone worrying about too many things and not getting deep sleep, or even having some sleep apnea or something like that, then you'll see that you're not increasing your LF and HF is really, RMSSD as well. I do mine right before I go to bed, and then I do it again in the morning, just to see how restorative my sleep was. So that's the number one, because if you're always low and you're getting a good night's sleep, then you move on to the next phase, which is, what are you thinking about? Or what are you worrying about? What are you holding in? And then what are you eating? How much exercise are you getting? Are you getting up and moving around throughout the day? I helped Debbie Potts, who was actually had adrenal fatigue, seriously. And that's how we met, was she was using HRV to improve. But she wrote a book, a manual on how to basically recover yourself. And I helped her edit it. And in there multiple times is that sitting is the new smoking. And so just because you exercise an hour a day, it's not enough. Right. You need to get up and move around all day. So that's another big piece, because what that does is it reminds the nervous system to do something. Just by standing up, as I mentioned maybe in our pre-chat, just by standing up, it causes your nervous system to need to increase your heart rate, increase the blood pressure, so that your blood doesn't drain out of your head and you fall down with a head rush. And so, but some of the more focused things you could do is a heart mouth coherence training, meditation. And everyone says, oh, I can't meditate. Well, nobody can. So join the club.
It's not easy. I will say that.
Just watch your thoughts. And I tell people, just try 2 minutes of just watching your breath, 2 minutes, watch thoughts come in, and then just notice them, and move that to 5 minutes until you're doing 10 minutes. And then when you get to about 20 minutes, if you can do that every day, be great. But if not, several days a week, that would be wonderful. Qigong, another energy movement. It's some people, yoga is just not accessible. Their joints feel too tight for that. Qigong or Tai Chi is another one. All of this moves energy and helps lower blood pressure and reduce stress. Opens up channels. Yeah, that's
fantastic. So I realized that I asked you this question in the context of HF and LF, but this applies to HRV as well. So if you want to improve
all of
the
it,
nervous system, these are the things you do. Sleep is number one, even for anti-aging and looking younger and living a longer life. Sleep is by far number one. So folks, if you're listening, please fix your sleep, number one, and then move on to all the wonderful tips that Rhonda's been talking about. I do want to ask you, for athletes, Rhonda, that are overworking, overtraining, or doing, some people do high intensity workouts every day. This can stress out the nervous system. Does that show up in the data with a higher LF number then? It
shows up with, the LF-HF, and I'll back up a little bit, is a sign of your power level, in general. And that is the sign of a recovered person. So if you are weekend warrior, training for, an Ironman, 3 kids at home, stressful job, and you're not getting your recovery time, you will be stressed in terms of the ratio of the LF and HF, and you can see on there's a LF HF ratio.
Yes.
So that takes out the power level. And you may see your power numbers low. So, and what I mean by low for someone who's basically healthy and stressed is in the couple hundreds, 300, whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, no, if you're not recovered, your HF and LF will be low.
Okay. I guess one last question on that in terms of the ratio. Is it ideal to have a ratio of 1-to-1 when it comes to HF and LF?
Yes.
Okay. That means you're perfectly balanced, that your stress is being balanced by the rest and digest vagus nerve, as opposed to you being more in the stress mode, at least during the session, right?
Yeah. So when you're relaxing, maybe even just watching TV, something that's not scary or violent, you should see around 1. Sometimes you can even see be at 0.9 or 0.8. But it's when you're relaxing, because when we're sitting and talking like this, we're in more of a beta brain state, if you will.
Yeah.
And so our nervous system is responding and doing, and so you're going to see a lot of variety. But it's more when you're resting, when you wake up after a really good night's sleep, feeling happy to be awake, happy to start your day, then you could see yourself around 1. Absolutely.
Okay. Have you seen people in all your work with this, Rhonda, that have a higher parasympathetic, meaning a higher HF? And the reason I'm asking you this is probably when we look at some of the longer lived people that have very little stress. And right now I'm thinking about these monks that meditate up in the Tibetan mountains. I would imagine, and maybe put money on, that their HF is either 1-to-1 or maybe even higher than their LF. And is there any correlation between longevity of your life and some of these HRV and or some of these high frequency numbers that you have seen so far?
So when it comes to the longevity, what we're looking for is to maintain our resilience. And I'll explain. Ample research shows that in general, our HRV, and when I say HRV, I'm going to refer to all the metrics, RMSSD, SDNN, LF, HF, all of that comes down. Okay. And so we have another app called Daily Beat that shows you where you are in your quadrant, and it's age and gender adjusted. Okay. So because when you're 60, we don't expect your all the HRV metrics to be the same as when you're 20 and healthy. Okay. And so as far as anti-aging and longevity goes, is we want to maintain our resilience. And I think there's a term for it, homeostatic capacity. And that is not homeostasis, which is what sort of Western medicine does. They just put in a chemical and they try to bring you back to homeostasis. But that's not addressing the root cause, and which is the ability, providing your body the ability to bring itself back like it did when it was young. So in terms of staying young, monitor your HRV. When you see it starting to, and this is, once again, it's decades of measuring, but not every day, but just like blood pressure, I think people should know their HRV, even more importantly. And so going, okay, what have I not been doing? Well, I haven't been doing my meditation. I haven't been getting my usual exercise, and I've been eating out a lot. And so I'm having these environments that are not good for me. And I can see that because I've noticed in the last 2 months, my HRV, this wasn't a one-off day, which happens. I'm noticing that there's a trend line going on here with my HRV. And so I need to go back and look at what I'm doing and why I'm allowing sort of this brittleness, if you will, to come into my body. Because a low HRV is sort of like a old rubber band that won't stretch anymore. New rubber bands stretch and boing back. But old rubber bands, first of all, don't want to stretch. They get all crusty and then they don't snap back. And so HRV is a metric for longevity and anti-aging to tell if what you're doing is still working or was ever working. Okay.
Very interesting.
So
yeah.
All the metrics. So once you've been measuring it, and I think this is important to remember to say, everyone's going to have their own sort of area that they fall in HRV. Like you're young and very healthy. You're probably practicing a lot of what you're interviewing and preaching. I can tell by just your initial numbers. So you're going to have your norms are going to be like up in this quadrant. And other people who are basically healthy are going to be in this quadrant. And then they've got unhealthy people that are kind of down here, and unhealthy also mentally as well. So once you sort of get where you generally are, and once again, with our app, you can export this into a CSV and do a spreadsheet and do your own little plots.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so you can track that. But it's really a great measure. It's also we call it generative feedback. So besides it being a measure of other things you're doing, it's a immediate feedback to let you know that you just did something that caused you to go to fight or flight. And I'm going to give you an example with a hybrid car. So the first time you get a hybrid car, you're like, oh, I just learned that if I accelerate slower, I don't turn on the engine. I stay in electric mode. So this one behavior change, which is always accelerating slower, will save you a lot of gas and keep you in electric mode. Right. So same thing with what we call generative feedback, when you're sort of wearing the chest strap and having the app going, and you can have it alert you when something happened. And I'm going to share something that happened to me. Once again, it comes from chip design, where you're like, waiting for the simulator to finish. And I'm sensitive to latency. And so when a browser loads, if it's always 10 seconds, I'm good. But if it's always 10 seconds and then it's 20 seconds, my face is in the screen and I'm like going, right. And so I learned that with SweetBeat HRV, because I was sitting there and I had it on and I was just working away, and it alerted me. And I'm like, what am I doing? My face is in the screen, my shoulders are all hunched up. And so that one change will affect me for the rest of my life, because I'll probably be on computers for the rest of my life. So that's the generative feedback.
That is fantastic. Yeah.
So that's not quite a biofeedback, because I consider biofeedback more like a heart math, where you're watching something and you're staring at the computer or the phone and doing a biofeedback like that. This is more going about your day and then getting an alert and then stopping and going, what am I doing? And then once you change that one behavior, then your fight or flight response throughout the day will reduce significantly.
That's very interesting. I'd like to ask you a follow-on question on that. How does somebody generate the alert? Let's say we're going about our day. I have a chest strap on me right now, and I was doing that for a meal, which we'll talk about in a second. But let's say I'm going about my day. Do I leave the app in stress mode and then it's tracking the whole day? Yes. And then
you'll go in, there's a settings gear wheel on that front page. You'll open that up, and there's a whole section where you can set alerts. You can set stress alerts. You can set heart rate alerts. Because some people have a tachycardia and they want to know if their heart goes too fast. Other people have bradycardia and they want to know if it drops too low. So you can have it alert you. There's a few settings there that you can do. You can also have a breath pacer pop on, and that breath pacer is designed to have you breathe at this basic 2-to-1 ratio. So they've learned that you'll basically kick on the vagus nerve by inhaling to a count of 4 and exhaling to a count of 8. Or inhaling to a count of 2, exhaling to a count of 4, or 3, 6. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. And so that breath pacer, which you can put your own pictures in, so it's things that will cheer you up, maybe your baby or your dog or cat or something. So lots of things you can do in real time, besides measuring all the other stuff that you
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been using the breath pacer because it shows up, and I just start training myself in my vagal tone to get better. And it's a little bit harder to do when you're starting off, exhaling longer than your inhales. Okay. But once you get used to it, it calms you down pretty quickly. So that's a nifty trick that you guys added on to the app. So good job.
And it's measurable.
Yes.
So our engineer who was developing the very first app was driving, had it on, and it was sitting on his seat, and he hit traffic and it alerted him. And then he said, oh my goodness, this works. This breathing in and out at this pace. I said, yeah, it does. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, a few more questions, I guess, and I'll hurry up because we're coming up on time. One of my questions was to ask you how HRV changes, or all these metrics change as we get older.
And I think your answer is what you're saying is that it depends on the person because it changes person to person. But generally, for the same person as you get older, do these numbers decrease then?
Yes.
Okay, just like everything else.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's if you're allowing your body to go that way. I have the HRV of a healthy 35-year-old.
So you're training it using the techniques you shared with us earlier? Is that how you do it?
I've been doing, so I did heart math for a long time. I've done all of the hollow sync, center point research, meditation. Once again, I spent 3 years in graduate school. Learning about my triggers. I've exercised regularly and I eat very clean. So I've done all of the above.
Okay.
And I do. So I'm 60. I just turned 60. Do you believe it?
Oh, I don't. You
I
look way
do.
younger.
My HRV is really aligned with a 25, 30-year-old.
Fantastic. Well, I want to be like you when I'm older, Rhonda. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to look at heart math. We talked about this before we started the recording, and I'll see how that changes it. And I'll also start tracking more of my heart rate HRV on a running basis to see if I can find or uncover some of my triggers. And the way to uncover a trigger is either your pulse goes up. So instead of the resting heart rate of 55 or the current heart rate that you might have like 60 or 65, it'll go up to what, 80, 90 in terms of...
Depends on the person. So I'm one of those low resting heart rate people. And it's not because I'm some elite athlete. I have, in college even, my resting heart rate was 50. So for me, if it were to suddenly go to 75, that's a big jump. So once again, I really want to stress that one size does not fit all in any aspect of life, maybe your shoe size. But with HRV in particular, you can't compare yourself with someone else. You're going to find your sphere. What is your resting heart rate in the morning when you've had a good night's sleep? A lot of people don't know. In fact, I was just talking to my sister. She has no clue. So the first thing to do is to really start figuring out where your baseline is and then go from there. Okay.
2 last questions. Number 1, you've got a test or a food sensitivity test on the app.
Yes.
Which I tried on today. But before I share my experience, I'd love for you to share with the listeners how that works.
So this is a great thing for your listeners to learn about. Basically, it's based on the Coca Pulse test. So it's called a food sensitivity test. And Dr. Coca was a renowned immunologist in the 50s. He founder of the Journal of Immunology. And his wife just had these funny things and they couldn't figure out what it was. The scratch test and trying to find allergies, which really didn't identify anything. And so what he did was develop what's called the Coca Pulse test. And it turns out that if you're sensitive to something, but not full allergic, then your heart rate will increase a certain number of beats per minute. I think that's 16 beats or something. And so what our food sensitivity test does is incorporate the Coca Pulse test into a nice app where you can easily use it, because doing it on your own with a piece of paper isn't so easy. And so what you do is you take your baseline pulse in the morning, just to for the pulse test, it knows where your baseline is. And then you take your pulse again right before you're going to eat. And that's to make sure you just didn't finish from the gym and your heart rate hasn't recovered, or that it's not artificially elevated too much for some other reason, because that will throw the test off. And then you hit, I'm done eating. And then you write down what you're eating. So I suggest people just test meals. And then if you're wearing the chest strap, it'll take your pulse at 30, 60, and 90 minutes and then give you a result. If your pulse increases by, I think it's 16 beats per minute during that time, assuming you're not out working out or doing something, but you're just doing regular work, it means you ate something you're sensitive to. And this means that you've been eating things that are contributing to low-level inflammation, which, as you know, as a longevity person, is almost as bad as the stress as the weak link, is this low-level inflammation. And so if you discover you've eaten a meal, then you start breaking it down and figured out what it is.
Okay, perfect. So I did that today, and my numbers are 56, 70, 65, and 62. So I know that I ate cayenne pepper, a bunch of cayenne pepper, with my meal, with my eggs. this morning. And so I attribute some of the spike right after the meal, 270, to that. But then it came right back down to 65 and then 62, which is within striking distance of 56, which is where my resting heart rate was. So that means that I don't have allergy to eggs or cayenne pepper. Is that what this is saying?
Yeah. What was your morning baseline?
55.
So yeah, you're close with the 72, but not enough for the coca. And we follow he did tons of research on this, so we don't fudge it. So no, but you may have had eggs is actually the one that you would test again.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the low hanging fruit. You do eggs and you do wheat and milk products are kind of the first ones to be suspicious of.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, this is a great thing for people to use.
Fantastic. I did do a little bit of niacin, which caused a flush, a blood flow flush in my body. I also did some caffeine and some cayenne pepper on the eggs. So tomorrow I'm going to take all that away, just test the eggs by themselves.
Yeah.
And make sure that's not a problem. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So eggs, wheat, and dairy. Try those out if you have.
Those are the first.
The app. This is a good, cheap way, almost free, I would say, to test this, because otherwise you're paying for food sensitivity tests, which can get quite expensive.
Yeah, and it's not only is expensive, but you want to just go about your day and eat your meals. And if you don't have a chest strap on, it prompts you to just touch your neck and enter the number, and it doesn't require a strap.
Okay, I noticed that. All right, Rhonda, there's other devices on the market as well that claim to measure HRV and give you numbers. How does Sweet Beat HRV compare against those on a chest strap, I would imagine? Are those new devices as good as what we have with the chest strap in your app?
So that's an awesome question because we get it all the time. HRV, because we're especially the frequency domain, it's very sensitive to accurate data. And so we need single lead EKG accuracy, which you get from a chest strap. So the Apple Watch, the Fitbit, even the Oura Ring, we love it. But what they're doing is measuring what's called, I'll just give the simple term. It's measuring the expansion and contraction of your capillaries. So if you look on the bottom of the Apple Watch or the Fitbit, there's a little light that shines in. And it's actually looking at the expansion and contraction of capillaries. And so what you get is kind of a pulse wave from that, which is totally great for heart rate. But in order to get the specific beat times down to the milliseconds, which is what we get from the chest strap, it's just not accurate. You'll get bogus readings. And trust me, we have tried for 10 years to get a wrist-worn device to work. And so it's just, it's not accurate. And we're electrical engineers. And so we pride ourselves on being perfect,
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I'm going by what you're saying, and I'm going to use the chest strap to measure more of my data.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh, yes. I was going to ask you, you've got a new device that you're integrating with and a new app that's coming out. So tell us about that.
Yes. So we finally, you have no idea. We've tried with Fitbit. So we tried everything to get away from the chest strap, which is just, it eliminates a huge percentage of people. If you're a biohacker, it might not bother you, but a lot of people just don't want to put that on. So we finally have a single lead EKG device that's in the app. It's in the App Store getting approved right now. So if you buy our Sweet Beat HRV or Daily Beat, if it doesn't support this yet, it will. So now you can just hold this little device for your 3-minute checkup or 5 minutes or your HRV for training or even your heart rate recovery, which we didn't talk about, but it's another indication of your orthostatic capacity. And so it's very simple. I keep this right by my bed because I mentioned I do a morning reading and a bedtime reading. I want to see how restorative my sleep was. There's all sorts of things I get from that.
And for folks listening to this, Rhonda's holding up a device that allows her to put her thumbs onto these two sensors, which then are tracking this, right? So you're saying two hands, two thumbs on the sensor. So that's better than a ring or just the Fitbit that would be on one hand.
Yeah, the Fitbit and iWatch and all that, they just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not possible to get a good HRV reading for that. But it's great for heart rate. So you could certainly use that for the food test.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, because that's a pulse-based test. Okay.
We tested. It's just not happening.
Okay,
Well,
fantastic.
we're very excited about this. Very excited.
You don't own the hardware, right? You have the app that goes with the hardware.
No, you can go to our website and see what it is, and then just click through to Amazon.
Okay, fantastic. Speaking of the website, Rhonda, where can listeners find you and connect with you and get the new device?
You can go to www.sweetwaterhrv.com.
Fantastic.
You can find us on Facebook at Beat Healthy, BEAT, like a heartbeat. So Beat Healthy, and also on Twitter at Beat Healthy.
Very cool. Rhonda, thank you so much. This has been a very fantastic and fascinating episode. I'm sorry I didn't know as much as I thought I did about HRV. And so thank you for educating me and hopefully the listeners as well. And I'd love to have you back in a few months or even next year to continue the discussion.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.